So welcome back to our mini-series on meditation for beginners. Last week we've already looked at the interplay between aim in life and our ability to find time in our everyday lives for meditation. This week we're going to be taking a look at how we can apply meditation to solve different sorts of problems which we may come across in life. Indeed, there are many different sorts of problems in life, both material and spiritual. Different sorts of problems need to be dealt with in different sorts of ways. If we know only material solutions to problems, if those problems happen to be spiritual ones, then we may have problems. But fortunately, if we meditate, then we have many more approaches than the normal person, which we can apply to different sorts of categories of problems in life. And this week, that's just what we're going to be looking at, the different categories of problems and how meditation can help us to deal with some of those. But what is important, first of all, is that we need to identify what sort of problems we're dealing with. And I think the differences between different sorts of problems will become apparent if we start to give a few examples. Most of the material problems which we come across in life are problems which we refer to as linear problems, which means that one problem tends to have one solution. And if you can get the problem back to its source, then it's very easy to deal with it. For example, if your house catches fire, then you know that the fire can only continue as long as it has oxygen to burn. So if you throw a bucket of water over the fire, then it has no oxygen anymore, and therefore the fire goes out. End of problem. These sort of problems, normally they're not problems which you need to meditate about to be able to solve. It's because they're purely material problems and they're purely linear problems. However, meditation can help you even with these sort of problems, because even though your house may be on fire and there's a logical solution to the problem, you don't need to meditate on it, but sometimes you can get emotionally involved with the situation. If you're upset that your house is on fire, then you may delay about finding the water in time to put it out. But if you're a meditator, then you may be able to have a calmer approach to the problem and to more quickly come to a solution to the problem. So it can give you the encouragement which you need, and it can help to give you the emotional distance which you need in order to solve the problem more efficiently. So this is something where meditation can help us to solve material or linear problems, helping to increase our patience and encouragement in the face of problems. The second thing which meditation can help us to do when we come across problems is to help us realize the limitations of rational solutions to problems. Sometimes the rational solutions themselves, they are not the whole story. For example, if you meet up with someone who's very sad about something, there may be a temptation to get emotionally involved with them again, and you may feel that if you are sad too, maybe it will help them to feel better. But in fact, two sad people doesn't help to make the world a better place. You need to have your own emotional stability in order to help others out of their problems. So this is a second way in which meditation can help you to give you the stability of mind to be able to realize the limitations to rational solutions to problems in life. For a third sort of problem which meditation can help us with a lot, by being a spiritual mirror to our own well-being, is by helping us to see through problems of which we are a part ourselves. Sometimes when we're a part of the problem, it's the most difficult thing to understand in the world. And on this point, I'd like to tell you a short story which illustrates just how we can become part of the problem without realizing it. And this is a problem which concerns something which you call holy water. Holy water is something which you have in many different religions, and normally it's seen as something rather superstitious, which you sprinkle on things which are giving you problems in order to make the problem go away. And even in Buddhism, we have a lot of superstitious people, and sometimes they don't look any deeper than the superficial effects of holy water. But in our own temple here in Thailand, we once had an example of a woman who was having problems with her husband, and the problem was that the husband would come home late every night, and when he came home, he'd come home drunk. His wife would be there waiting for him, and she'd tell him all about how unhappy she was with the drinking situation. And the husband's response to this problem was to come home even later the next night in order to try to avoid his wife, who was waiting there at the door to reprimand him every day. Eventually, at her wit's end, the wife went to the temple and asked one of the monks for holy water to sprinkle on her husband in order to make the problem go away. The monk, luckily enough, was a meditator, and he knew that possibly the wife had a part in the problem herself. So before giving her the holy water, he said that in order to make the holy water effective, then she'd have to do something quite special with it. And that was, before her husband came in the door each night, she must say her prayers and she must put the holy water in her mouth. If she put the holy water in her mouth, then it would be holy enough to make the problem go away. So, very faithfully, the wife took the holy water back with her to her home, and that very same night she waited for her husband to come home until sometime after midnight she heard the gate at the end of the garden path opening, and she said her prayers very quickly and she put the holy water in her mouth. With the holy water in her mouth, when the husband came through the door, instead of being able to complain very loudly to her husband about how bad she thought he was, in fact she couldn't say anything at all. Her husband was surprised, of course, but it didn't make him change his ways immediately. But he did start to think a little bit better about his wife. The same thing happened the next day. The husband came home late, and again he was drunk. But this time, when he came through the door and he saw his wife with a little smile on her face, perhaps from the fact she was not opening her mouth and she had her mouth filled with holy water, it made him feel that his wife was somehow more endearing than usual. And from that time onwards, he started to come home a little earlier and a little earlier, until in the end the problem went away altogether. Well, again, this is just a funny story, but it helps to show us how a person can unwittingly be someone who is part of the problem without them realizing it. And sometimes by solving a problem with ourselves, rather than just having holy water without realizing what it's really doing to us, this can be the real solution for finding a way out of the problem. The next sort of problem I'd like to talk about is the problem of what we call vicious circles. And in this respect, I'd like to show you a picture which is by a famous artist in Holland called Escher. And this picture is called going upstairs and downstairs, because you can see at the top of the tower there is a flight of stairs, and you can see hooded figures who are walking up the stairs and down the stairs. But if you follow them to see where they are going up the stairs, you find that as soon as they make a circuit of the building, that they come back to exactly where they were before. It's the same for the people going down the stairs. As soon as they make a complete circuit of the building, they come back to exactly where they were before. In fact, it's just something to do with the perspective in this drawing. But what you can see is that those people on the stairs, they're going round and round in circles, getting nowhere, but expending a lot of effort. And this is exactly what happens with many sorts of vicious circle, which is very hard to find a beginning or an end to the problem. In this particular picture, it's only one person who realizes the situation, and that's the person who gets an overview of the whole problem, the one who is off the stairs looking at the building from a distance. In the same way, if we want to solve vicious circle problems, then it's better if we are a meditator. And there are many examples of vicious circles where we have to find the appropriate place to break the vicious circle in order to solve the problem. And this gives me an example, which we find in many third world countries, of things like crops failing, and because crops failing, then the peasants have no income. Because they have no income, they can't buy fertilizer. When they can't buy fertilizer, the soil becomes worse in quality, and the next year the crops fail even worse than before. Without an input, in this case, of some sort of generosity on someone's part, then it's very difficult to know how to break the vicious circle, especially if we are involved with the vicious circle ourselves. And maybe closer to home problem, which is a vicious circle, is that of aggression. Sometimes if we are aggressive with someone else, they find it more difficult to forgive us. And when they don't forgive us, they become more aggressive. When they become more aggressive, then we find it more difficult to forgive them. And it makes us even angrier and more aggressive, and so on and so forth. We have an aggression which is always mounting in our society as a result. Unless there is forgiveness in this case as a way to know how to break out of this vicious circle, then it's very hard to know how to stop the aggression escalating. Or perhaps a last example of a vicious circle in the context of school is when a child hasn't done their homework, and the teacher becomes more curious about why the child has not done their homework, so the child lies more about why they haven't done their homework, and this just makes the teacher yet more curious about why the homework has not yet appeared. Only in this case, if the child will face up to the truth, will they be able to break out of the vicious circle. Knowing exactly where to break the vicious circle, this is again a subject which is a meditator is much better qualified to do than most people who are working on merely conceptual and linear ways of solving problems. It's the way which we can find a more creative solution to a problem, which sometimes is not in the problem itself, but may be completely separate from the problem. Some meditators have talked about the problem and the solution being as separate as the rain and the rainbow. Sometimes looking at the rain, you'd never believe that rain could give rise to such a beautiful thing as a rainbow, and yet the two are connected. These are the sort of connections which we are able to find if we're meditators, because we have a less linear way of going about finding solutions to the problems. A fifth sort of problem I'd like to talk about is the problem of attitude, and I won't say much about that because we've already heard the story about the Chinese woman who cried every day because of the sons who had the sunglasses factory and who had the umbrella factory. That's a problem of attitude which, if you change the way you look at the world by meditating and let go of negative attitudes, opening up to more positive attitudes, then you can start to solve many of the problems in life which are concerning you yourself. A sixth sort of problem I'd like to talk about is problems which can be prevented and which are better prevented than cured. In our society, most of the problems in society come from people who once upon a time were good, upstanding citizens in our society, but who at some stage compromised their own ideals or their own virtues in order to become unscrupulous members of our society. One way of solving the problems which they are creating is not to let them become unscrupulous people in the first place. And the best way to do that is not by punishing them or threatening them, but inspiring them to remain good. This is one of the works which meditators spend a lot of time doing. It's not a very spectacular work because you don't see the great contrast between before and after, which you see with reforming people who have had a lot of problems in the past. But keeping good people good is a very important aspect of meditation, because you give yourself the own encouragement to maintain a virtuous standard of living and to keep yourself on the straight and narrow instead of having to become a burden on others in society. And this would refer to many sort of problems which would be better prevented in our society, whether it be drug abuse or laziness or corruption. Many of these things could have been prevented if the people were more inspired in the first place. Last but not least, I wouldn't like to leave you thinking that meditators are those who run away from problems, but in fact meditation itself can be used as a way to improve the general positive vibration in society. And one way which we can do this through our meditation is by spreading what we call loving kindness. I'm sure many of you who have meditated have a feeling of well-being when you've meditated. Maybe it's a feeling of well-being which you find is just personal for you, maybe a feeling which is located just inside yourself at your center. But if you're the sort of meditator who can spread that feeling of well-being by what we call spreading loving kindness at the end of your practice, then in fact these good vibrations can help to make society a better place, maybe not in a visible way, but certainly by spreading a feeling of forgiveness first in our own family and then in society as a whole. It becomes a very powerful meditation if you do it very often. So anyone who likes to make a difference to society without intervening personally can try spreading loving kindness as a way to improve the quality of society as a whole. So that is a total of 7 different ways in which we can use meditation to solve problems. As meditators, we're not the sort of people who run away from problems, but we use meditation to find alternative ways to solve problems. So this week we've been looking at some of the different ways in which meditation can better equip you to categorize and deal with the different sorts of problems in life. Try to notice yourself ways in which you can apply meditation to solving problems in life during the week to come. Next week we're going to be concluding this mini-series of 10 by showing how meditation can change society at large for the better. In the meantime, please try to maintain your daily meditation, and if possible try to keep a diary of your experiences and your experiences of solving problems through meditation as well. So see you next time.